All right, so let's talk about the Kenny Pickett thing, right? Because I think there are a lot of different layers to talk about this on. Right? There is the conversation of what your perception is of Kenny Pickett coming into this, right?
Sure.
Uh, we have been on the opposite end of the Kenny Pickett propaganda, right? We've been the people who have been arguing
Yeah.
against it for years.
And I
Didn't want it.
admittedly have been one of the worst offenders of that.
Well,
So,
I here's what this is why I'm like the context in which you talk about him is important.
yeah.
I did not want Kenny Pickett to be a first round pick. I did not want the Browns to consider before we even traded for Deshaun Watson. I didn't think Kenny Pickett was worth the first round pick that you would have went for. Honestly, the Browns didn't either, right? I've always thought that Kenny Pickett, people always defaulted to Kirk Cousins as his comp, which is going to come up later. But I've always thought he was more Colt McCoy to me, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's where I've always felt like he has landed. Now, if we are having the conversation of Kenny Pickett as a franchise quarterback, obviously that is falling well beneath the line of what you need to achieve. But if we're having the conversation about Kenny Pickett as a backup, then that starts to change a little bit, right? Me personally, I think a fifth year for him says he's the backup in the same way that Justin Fields was the backup for Russ, right?
Yeah.
They're moving a fifth for him tells me that they believe he can be a better than average level backup quarterback. I think we can agree on that, right? Like that's what the fifth round price tag says. I don't think it means that they're going to start him intentionally, but I do think it means that they feel like he can be a better than average starter. Now, I have questions about whether he could be a better than average backup quarterback.
Yeah.
But that's where they have to be if they've made this move. Um, for me, I'm like I would have rather just signed Jacoby Brissett. Maybe if you're interested in Kyle Trask, but to be
Joe
fair, the
Flacco.
prices for these quarterbacks has been significantly higher than what we've seen. We've seen what Justin Fields, who was in this position last year,
Yeah, he
go
cashed
for
in.
$40 million, 30 of it
30
guaranteed,
guaranteed. Yeah.
35 a year for Sam Darnold, and none of it's on incentives,
I got a
right?
question about that real quick. What the hell are the Seahawks doing? Why why would you trade Geno Smith away to turn around and pay $35 million to Sam Darnold? I don't get that at all.
I think it's hubris. I think it's hubris. I think they think, hey, we made Geno Smith into this. We can take another guy and extend that longer, right?
Okay.
I think they're greatly underestimating why Sam Darnold was the way that he was.
Yes,
But
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I think the Browns see this as that. I wonder how ridiculous the backup quarterback market has gotten because what Jimmy Garoppolo got 11. And that's where
Okay.
my eyebrows.
Well, he got up to 11. I think he
Yeah.
got like
He got the same
4.
deal that Jameis got last year.
He
Or not
got like
Jameis, that who got that deal? Somebody got a like an incentive up
yeah.
to deal that people report. Was it Jameis?
I don't know. I think his base though is like 3.5 or 4.
Yeah, I remember having a similar argument with Jameis Winston here. But like
Yeah.
nothing he did in LA last year would indicate that like you felt like that was a possibility for Jimmy Garoppolo to get that up to deal. At least with Jameis, he had those 2 years he was a starter
Right.
to lean on where he had that nice run to where okay, it makes sense that he get a up to 8 million deal or whatever it was.
Hmm.
And like I'm wondering what was the market actually like? Like the Geno Smith trade, I just don't feel like they were trying to ship him to anywhere else other than Pete Carroll. Felt
Yeah.
like that they're like, I haven't heard anybody else be like in that trade, right? So I don't know how much we can judge off that Geno deal because it felt like that was a we want to move on. We feel like Sam Darnold's better. Let's send Geno somewhere where he won't mind type of move there. But yeah, that's my thing with Kenny is how much of the reaction to this is based, and it's kind of a similar thing we talked about it with Kirk Cousins, where Kirk Cousins bugs me as a $45 million quarterback. As a $1.2 million quarterback, he does not.
Yeah.
right? And that's the thing. Kenny Pickett bugs me if you take him in the first round. Kenny Pickett bugs me if you spend that asset on him. If you're telling me you're going to spend the next 2 years trying to dedicate your franchise to him being a franchise quarterback. But with the whole Kenny Pickett thing, I wonder how much is just bugging me just because of that perception and this being somebody that publicly I just did not think was very good for what people were hyping him up to be versus does he fulfill the role that's going to be asked of him, which is can he be a backup quarterback, which look, he did this for the Eagles last year. I know people are saying he can't be a backup, but I mean, he was the backup quarterback for the Super Bowl team last year. And he did have to play. So, and
How
he
much did
played
he
well
play?
when he did. He played like what, 3 quarters?
Yeah, I guess. So here's my
He had
question.
to start, right?
Yeah, if he's yeah, he did. You're right. If he's if they gave up a fifth for him, like I want somebody to tell me like, okay, that's fine. He's coming in to compete for the backup job. Like they should have, like the Browns should be bringing maybe 4 bodies into camp. Maybe you draft a quarterback, you bring in your starter, maybe Cousins, whatever it is, and then maybe you bring in another player to quarterback to compete with Kenny for the backup job. But just handing him the backup job, I feel is unserious.
Well, we'll see what else they fill out the room with, right?
Yeah.
Because this is the first name. It's clear they're shaping out this whole room, right? Because I don't think anybody's left anymore. Zapp is gone. DTR is gone. It's what, Kenny Pickett. We know Deshaun Watson's not going to be active this year. So Kenny Pickett's just the first name they've brought in here. I do think I'm not saying he's going to be handed this backup job. What I am saying is that him being traded for a 5th round pick gives him the inside track.
Yeah, it makes it feel like it for sure.
Yeah, because it does. It's enough of an investment on him. And basically, you're saying, hey, our old backup, we're trying to upgrade from him. We feel like Kenny Pickett's an upgrade who has a similar upside benefit that we felt like DTR had, where like DTR could be a starter if you just put the right things around him. Maybe they're looking at his overall body of work, which, to be fair to Kenny Pickett, as much as we clowned on him, was enough to get out the way at Pittsburgh at times for them to win games and get to the playoffs. Not saying that they won games because of Kenny Pickett, but he was enough to get out the way and allow their defense to win games or allow other elements of the team to win games, which, again, if we're talking about him in the context of a starting quarterback, as a franchise quarterback, not even close to good enough. But if you're talking about what you asked for, a backup quarterback, like if we were starting Case Keenum, that's exactly what you want out of Case Keenum. So there is reason to believe, if we look at this just as like, I think him being the first guy that they move for makes the optics on this and the reaction to it what it is, because people are like, we have no quarterbacks on the roster other than Kenny Pickett. Like, some people are jumping to, that's the projected starter right now because there's nobody else on the roster right now to play quarterback. But I think as a backup, if you look at his body of work, not in the context of judging it how we've had to judge it based on where he was selected and how Pittsburgh talked about him. It makes sense that this guy would be seen as a very, very solid backup quarterback option, and he's super young, and the contract is ultimately really cheap for a room that they need to be extremely cheap this year.
Well, let me ask you this. If compared to Jameis Winston as your backup last year going into the year, I view Jameis as leaps and bounds better than Kenny Pickett.
I think Jameis is more capable of putting up numbers than Kenny Pickett for sure. If we're talking about the purpose, I think,
managing an offense, maybe.
Yeah, Jameis don't really manage well, right? And I think that's been the problem with Jameis. So I think you can probably get slightly better game management. Well, I think better game management out of Kenny Pickett. The other thing with Kenny is that he's just going to be way cheaper than Jameis would have been to bring back. Jameis is probably going to be somebody you have to give a Jimmy Garoppolo deal to, right? Where it's like 3-4 plus incentives that he might reach, might not. And then there's the question of like personality wise, was that a fit for what the Browns have going on? And I don't think it was a fit for what the Browns have going on. So it might not be the guy that you want around there, right? So maybe that factored into it as well.
I guess I am more upset than anything. Like, I just would never give up. I understand it's a cheap option, and like you can make the case that as a game manager, he can fill that role, and I get that's like kind of the light that you're trying to shine on this. But like giving up a fifth for Kenny Pickett to me sounds insane.
It's high.
That's
Like that
crazy to me.
I did this is the awkward position I'm in. I would never want to do this, right?
No,
But
no.
if I try to put myself aside, right, my own preferences, my id or ego, is it the ego or the id? I don't know, but aside, right, it's one of those two. If I try to
Yeah,
put it aside, right, and I have to do this with quarterback this year because there's a lot of options people are advocating for that I think are bad because of my own personal evaluation of these guys. But
right.
I do have to see what the logic is and if the logic is sound here. And this is one of those things where I'm in that crossroads where it's like, okay, the logic's okay, right? Like, I don't think it's amazing logic. And like for a front office that usually, outside the Watson thing, of course, is a lot more careful with these trades and usually gets a lot more out of it than what they did, it does feel a little high if we're looking at him as a backup. But I have to think about it like this. They have no quarterbacks on the roster. Everything that we're mentioning, Kirk Cousins, that's hypothetical. Bringing back Joe Flacco, that's hypothetical. Aaron Rodgers, if you want to go that direction, that's hypothetical. Whoever they want to take at quarterback, even if they want to use the number 2 overall pick, hypothetical based on what Tennessee does. What if you want to do something at 33? It's all hypothetical. So maybe they felt like they needed to spend a little bit more to get somebody back here that could be cheap. And if they had to start, they feel like would not get in the way of other elements of the team being able to carry you to success. And Kenny Pickett, for all the criticisms that I have, and I have plenty of them with Kenny, has proven that if you have a good enough team around him, he can get out the way and you can win a game or two with Kenny. I think what Steelers make the playoffs one time with Kenny as a starter, and the other time Mason Rudolph beat him out for the job. I think that's maybe it. This does make me concerned about their quarterback evaluation, because I'm not gung-ho about Kenny Pickett being able to fulfill that. But if your evaluation tells you that that's where that's at and that's what the logic is, I guess. But I'm going to be very skeptical about that working, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. They think that I've said it before in our Slack. I was like, don't they have a hand-sized guardrail or something that, I mean, but either way, I understand, that
We about to find out. We might
yeah,
find out. They might draft Jalen Milroe.
that's what I said. What are they
and
what are they doing to me here?
and find out there's no guardrail.
Yeah, there is no hand-sized guardrail. But although he did grow his hand somehow, like 6 inches in between the Senior Bowl and the Combine.
It's massage
magically.
techniques. I think
Yeah,
Brandon Allen did it
I
before,
think so
right?
too.
Where you stretch your hand.
But I get your point. And like, listen, I don't know what their plan is to do with him, so I'm not going to overreact. But like, I'm with you. It gave me huge. I was upset, visibly upset at first. Like, what are we doing? Right? Why are we? And to the point in the chat, it is a late fifth. It's the Lions' fifth, so it's like pick 165. I think it's the Za'Darius pick, right?
Yeah.
So, I guess that's not as bad. And he can manage a game. He can get out of the way. I don't know. Like, would you rather have him and then pick off the scrap heap for a quarterback to maybe be your third, or see what's there available later as a backup, or would you rather make this trade? Which is a weird trade involving DTR to go to them. What are they going to do with DTR? What do they want to do with DTR? I mean, I feel like a DTR and a 7th swap for Pickett sounds good to me. I don't know what, I guess maybe they had to do this. They'll have to figure it out. And like you said, you've made a good point. I'm just trying to value, like, what would they come away with in the draft with a late fifth? I mean, there's a lot of good backs in this draft. There's a lot of good edges. There's a lot of good defensive tackles that'll be around at pick 165 that might have been a more value than maybe Kenny Pickett. And that's just kind of where I get caught up.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe I'm overvaluing. Philly says I'm overvaluing pick 165 in the draft, and I may be.
Well, it's
I just
not going to
am not.
take much for Kenny Pickett to, like, let's say Kenny Pickett starts like 5 games. Approximate value says a 5th-round pick. It's usually worth somewhere between like 4 or 5 points of approximate values, the average of what you get from a player's career from that round. So, I mean, like Kenny could do that if he's the backup here for a year and he starts like 3 games and wins 2 of them.
Yeah.
That'd be enough to be worth that pick, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
sure. Yeah,
it's
500 in 4 games.
I think the compensation isn't what concerns me about the Kenny. It's like, hey, because there are no other quarterbacks on the roster right now, what is exactly the plan at the quarterback position? Because I think that's more of the concern, right? It's like, okay, what are we going to do? Because we're going to have to wait on this Kirk Cousins thing until March 16th, right?
That's what scares me the most.
It seems like there's some kind of hold up here with the Aaron Rodgers stuff in Pittsburgh, right? So something could happen here. I'm hearing absolutely nothing about Russell Wilson. So, like, are we in the market for Russ? Like, is that something that could go down here? Which would be hilarious because didn't Russ replace Kenny?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's look, the starting quarterback position is likely going to be what it is, right, this year, which is not going to be amazing because everything else that happened. And yeah, I don't really know if there's going to be a way to swing that into anything other than like, hey, man, we're just going to have to try to roll through this for a year with what we can get here. And then hope that next year we're in a much better position to attack that spot. I also think there's a conversation. A lot of people are focusing on 2 for quarterback. I wonder if 33 is a more attractive spot for quarterback for the Browns because you could trade up from 33 to go get Shador if he falls, and it's seeming like he's going to fall. I think one of these quarterbacks are going to fall in this year's draft class, significantly so, because I think if they fall out the top 10, they're going to fall pretty far until somebody trades up to get them. So I think 33, trading up there or sitting at 33 and maybe taking somebody like Jalen Milroe are where they're thinking quarterback is for this year. So, yeah, it's – go ahead.
So if the plan is Kirk Cousins, right? Like, as you look around the landscape of the quarterbacks that are being talked about or in talks with today, like, it worries me that they're playing this waiting game for Cousins. It strikes me as a little risky business of not knowing what is going to happen and what happens to the rest of the quarterback market in the meantime if they're playing that game. Like, that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what else they could really do, right? Like, so because they weren't going to be in on that Sam Darnold market. The Justin Fields price was just too extreme.
I guess, like, how much would Joe Flacco cost right now?
Joe would probably be around that minute. Well, he got like almost 10 last year. So he'd probably be 4 or 5 million.
I would be a big proponent of bringing in Flacco as the backup in the meantime, because if you had to, you could start him for a little bit or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
I get. I agree with you. I think Flacco would probably be a higher quality backup than Kenny. I think their evaluation is that Kenny Pickett's not that different from Joe Flacco, but he's much cheaper.
Maybe.
I mean, at this point, I mean, Flacco wasn't spectacular last year.
No,
so
and he wasn't. But I think he has played some of his better. Like, he was poor then went and sat on the couch, then played for the Browns and played much better. He by far played his best football with the Browns. He had a
Hmm.
couple good games with Indy and then fell off a cliff. I think that there's something to him playing in Stefanski's system. Um,
He's also what, almost 40 now?
yeah. That's the other thing is he's 40.
Yeah.
I just think I get it. They wanted a younger option. And as Charlie Chuck saying Stefanski clearly chose Kenny because he doesn't turn it over.
That's not really true though. Kenny was 15 touchdowns,
Yeah.
14 interceptions throughout his career. I
And
I
they
don't
may
know,
go
man.
4 quarterbacks. They may go 4 quarterbacks, and maybe Kenny ends up being a camp arm and gets beat out for, you know what I mean, the backup spot. This may just be like a placeholder right now. But the fifth, to me, to your point, the fifth round draft pick indicates to me that he is valued higher than that to them.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be rostered, right? If we know anything about Andrew Berry, I mean, he doesn't cut fifth round picks, let alone people he's traded
That's
a fifth round pick for. So he's going to be on the active roster at the end of the 53 man cut down. You don't trade for somebody you're willing to leave up into the waiver wire, right? So yeah, he's going to be on the roster. I think he's probably going to be your backup quarterback. Again, I think a lot of this comes down to how it makes us feel at this given moment because there's so much uncertainty about what they're going to do. We might feel completely different about this at the end of April when we look at this and go, okay, well, Kenny slots in here. We have this. And then we drafted a guy at 33. So we really are just putting in layers between starting that guy at 33 and giving that guy that 6 to 8 weeks that we talked about, right? It could form out to be a plan like that. It could be a Pittsburgh last year plan where it's like it's Kenny Pickett, it's it's Russ or it's Kirk Cousins, and that's pretty much it. Maybe you draft like somebody super late, like a Dylan Gabriel or something like that. And you're just basically saying we're punting this quarterback conversation down till next year, or you go get Aaron Rodgers or something like that. I think this is the first move in a move of many for the Browns quarterback room. And that's the only thing I would caution Browns fans is like, hey, this is not a definitive move at quarterback for them. I don't think this is their final move at the position. I think this is just a opening move.
well, for sure, yeah. I
Yeah.
just as we both kind of agree, it's not my favorite move they've ever made. I was pretty harsh earlier. I was calling it unserious and ranting and raving around, but I get it. There's a lot more to come with this room, so I'll reserve judgment a little bit to what they decide to do with it. Let me ask you this: with the Titans and the Dan Moore move and the other moves they've made, does that indicate anything to you about what they're going to do at one?
They signed Dan Moore for so much money, you would think that means they're going to go
Quarterback?
for quarterback, but it might be that they're looking for, like, they could go for somebody older. They could be in that older quarterback market too.
Yeah, they were.
Or it could be, hey, they see Dan Moore as a future left tackle, like of the future for them, right? And they just want to lock that up long term, even though the plan is to get a quarterback later. Like, I don't know if Dan Moore's the move you make because you're like, we need to get the offensive line fixed right now.
Yeah.
I think if that were to, like, if they were the team to trade for Laramie Tunsil, then I would be like, oh, they're definitely taking Camp Moore because that is a move that you make for right now, right?
Yeah.
The Dan Moore one, I think this is just an evaluation of him from their eyes of he might be a left tackle in the future, which, to be fair, we see Dan Moore when he plays against Myles Garrett, and
Yeah.
Myles Garrett makes him look terrible, right? I've
Really
made this
bad.
argument. Like, he's not as bad as Browns fans think that he is, because the only time
No.
we've seen him is literally on his worst days against Myles Garrett, which he does that to a lot of people. It's good that Myles is back on the team. But I do think that I don't think that they want to take a quarterback. I'm going to sit with that. I don't think they want to. I don't think they've ever wanted to take a quarterback. And there's too much smoke coming out of them for me to think that they're just like, why would, like, think about it like this, Brad. If you didn't want to take a quarterback and then nobody else wanted to trade up for that quarterback, Would that make you feel better about taking a quarterback number one overall?
If you're the Titans,
Yeah.
no, no,
That would like you would feel like I really don't want to do this now.
no. It would make you feel worse about it. Yes, if there's no market for him, especially because then you can't validate your evaluation in any way. Like nobody's calling, nobody's trying to get up to get this guy. It would make you feel very apprehensive about it. Um, they have rumored to be in talks with Russell Wilson, which I think is very interesting. The Titans, because that would change things big time. Because then maybe they're going Carter at one.
I think every move they've made screams Abdul Carter at one, right?
You do.
Yeah, I think everything they do feels like that's the direction they're going because like they let go Harold Landry, they've made some moves here that feel a little defensive oriented, right? They haven't been in the pass rusher market. They haven't been rumored for a lot of trades for edges. It feels like that. Like I've heard their name around some cornerback stuff, but not edge, right?
Yeah.
Like it's interest. It's an interesting absence there, right? Where you're hearing them even around quarterback. And in this offseason where it seems like people are just like bridge me to somewhere other than this offseason for quarterback. I mean, even this started last year, right? Like part of the reason Penix and Bo Nix go as early as they go is because these teams weren't confident in this draft class. You know, that was that was one of the things that came out. These teams did not think that the 2025 draft class would have good quarterbacks, so they decided to take them now, even if it was a little early. So, it just feels like everybody's trying to avoid this class for a long-term quarterback option. And Tennessee has to be aware of that, right? And I don't think a first-year GM would be super inclined to take that risk, especially if you spent the last month trying to like throw this pick away and nobody's trying to grab it, you know?
Feels too early in their process to be taking a quarterback, right? Like they don't expect to be super good this year, I don't think. Like, so it means it would make more sense for them to wait, I think. Because they may very well be at the top of the draft again next year, right? If they did go Carter at 1, do you think the Browns would go Ward at 2? Or do you think they'd go Shador? Or do you think they would what do you think? Or would they trade down?
I think they go Hunter.
You think they would go Hunter? You don't think a quarterback would go, man? Whew.
Yeah, I that's what my gut tells me, right? And my brain tells me it too. It goes against what a lot of people think, which I understand. A lot of people feel like, but I just don't want to be. I don't think you should take a quarterback, and the reason you're taking it is because you feel forced into taking one. I feel like it should be a red flag not to take one, right? Because if you did not feel strongly enough about Cam Ward to trade for the number 1 overall pick, you shouldn't take him at 2.
Okay,
like that's where like I don't because it's not it takes like a 4th or something to get him. So if you know that the 1st is up for grabs, anybody can take it. You're not willing to trade up for that 1st. Then why would you want to take him at 2? Because if you really thought that this dude was going to be the franchise guy, then you would have been fine with, hey, let's throw what's an extra 4th in it? We just spun a 5th for Kenny Pickett, right?
Sure.
What's an extra 4th to move up the 1? And then maybe a future pick next year to move up the 1 to secure the pick. You still get who you want. If you're I'm pretty sure Tennessee would love for us to want to trade up the 1. That'd be their perfect scenario, right? So they'll be willing to take a discount. The Browns know this. So if that pick is truly available, right, and Cam Ward does not go 1, and maybe they trade the pick or they just pass on Cam Ward entirely, take somebody else, take Abdul Carter, then if he's there at 2, I don't think it really changes anything because you really didn't believe in this dude to begin with because you didn't want to make the move. So you should go with who you feel like the best player available is. And I get the sneaking suspicion. This is just my intuition. I think they like Travis Hunter a great deal. I have my concerns about whether they would even take I would take Abdul Carter at 2. But if they were both there, I have my fears about if they would prefer Hunter. Not that Hunter's a bad player. I just prefer Abdul Carter to that. But yeah, I think there's a chance that even if Ward's there at 2, I don't think they're just going to take him there because everybody's expecting them to take him there, right? Like, ultimately, if you don't think that they want to take the dude and they're willing to trade you to pick, but you don't want to do that, then I think you're telling us right now what your decision is at quarterback. We'll see, because they got the whole week to make a move.
It's too early to know that, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think a move like that
if we get to the draft,
yeah.
I'm saying if we get to the draft, Cam Ward's there too, and the Titans ultimately did not take Cam Ward, then we do have enough information. You see what I mean? Because by the time we get there, it's like, okay, well, they didn't want Cam. We've heard all this stuff about them wanting to trade the pick.
If they just felt like they read the board well enough to know that they weren't going to pull the trigger on him, and they think he's sitting there, or you just think if you know and if you want somebody bad enough, you just give up the pick to make sure you get the guy.
If you think that's a franchise quarterback, if you think that's a franchise quarterback, you get the guy. You make sure you don't run the risk, because it's not, oh, we trust that Tennessee's not going to take. What if Tennessee trades that pick? Like, if you built this whole thing around the ideal of drafting this guy at 2, and Tennessee does not take, Tennessee trades that pick to New York, New York takes this guy at 2, you look like an idiot.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you got to secure it if you think that's a franchise quarterback. That's what I'm saying.
It's in the realm of possibilities that they love. I think it's in the realm of possibilities that they love Ward. And
if that's the case, we'll know, because I think they'll make a move. Yeah, they'll make a move for him, right? If they make a move for him, I'm more okay with that pick than if they just sat there and took him at 2 because everybody thought they should take him. Yeah. Because I think those are 2 different reasons to take a guy with 2 different outcomes that can result because of why you take a guy.